Hi, welcome to rose pruning. This is an introduction to the basic teachings that we're going to show you on how to prune a rose. We're going to take it and make it a lot simpler than you've ever heard of it before, because you know what you've heard before and you've been told and how difficult this is supposed to be, to the point that you just rip out your roses and just grow azaleas instead. You've heard it. Got to prune to 18 inches high, open up the center, outward facing butt eyes, make sure that it's a 45-degree angle, get your spirit level, for goodness sakes, it's got to be straight and completely across and deal with the center of the earth and the gravity. Also, make sure you get your bleach so you can sanitize between every single cut, stand on one leg, wear your best red underwear, and don't do it on a Tuesday. Okay, now I know that sounds a little silly, but it really has become that complex, and it isn't. Here's the thing you want to remember. You're only pruning a plant. It's not a rose, it's a plant. It's a shrub with flowers on it. You're a gardener's instinct, so we're going to rely on before anything else. And how we're going to do this is we're not going to worry about the name of the rose. We're going to worry about the class of the rose, whether it's budded, whether it's own root, any of that information. We're going to look at how the rose grows. Because how the rose grows and how you want to use it in your garden is going to tell you how to prune that rose. Roses grow in basically two different ways. We'll start by looking at that so you can identify how your rose grows in your garden. This is an example of a rose that puts up new growth from the base every single year. They have their ancestry in the old European roses, the gallicas and the damasks and the albas and the centifolias. You can recognize this growth habit in your own garden by looking to the center of the plant, and what you see are stems coming straight up from the base of the plant. There is very little branching off or very little broken structure. There's not a lot of twiggy growth in the middle. That tells you that this is the growth habit of this rose and you want to prune according to it. Because they do put up that new growth so quickly every single year, we have luxury in how we prune these. You can prune them short like a modern hybrid tea if you want to get long stem cut flowers, or you can prune them fairly high to get a nice shrub shape in your garden and have it covered with blooms. I normally prune this one to only about here, which is not a lot lower than it is right now. So again, to recognize the growth habit of these roses that put up canes from the base, look to the center, look for shoots coming straight up that don't have a lot of branching off, and that tells you that's this kind of rose, and that's how you have to prune it. This is the second kind of rose that we're going to look at in terms of how it grows, telling us how to prune it. These are the roses that are influenced by the Asian roses, the old tea roses and the old China roses. They're recognizable, and the growth habit is very different. You don't get those shoots that come straight up from the base and then begin to branch out in one season. This can take 2-3 years to build up the structure it takes to support the top of this plant. If you look, the canes come up, then they branch, and then they branch, and they just keep branching back and forth. Even this old cane way back here in the back is doing the same thing. And this is builds itself like scaffolding is the best analogy I can give you. You need that first layer of scaffolding, then you add your second layer of scaffolding, then you add your third layer. And if you take away that bottom layer, it all collapses. And also, it takes time to build it up. That's why these kinds of roses are best left not hard pruned. In fact, you want to leave them fairly high. I shape them up into here, 4 or 5 feet. It is about as low as I'm going to go with these. Some people don't even prune them at all and just basically cut the dead wood out and leave them. That's a personal choice, depending on how big you want this thing to be in your garden. So again, just keep in mind, these kind of roses are like scaffolding. They build themselves up. You can recognize them because they don't have those straight canes coming from the base, and they just build themselves up over time with all this different branching and a lot of this twiggy growth. And that's how you know you have this kind of rose, and we're going to prune them very differently. Okay, you're back. Now, let's talk a little bit about the tools that you're going to need in order to do the pruning. The first thing you want to get is a good pair of gloves. These are really, really, really necessary, because otherwise you can really cut your hands up. A lot of people wear the gauntlet gloves that come up to here. That's okay too, whatever your preference is. Pair of secateurs. You want what's called a bypass pair. That basically what that means is the blades do this when they make their cut, as opposed to an anvil pair that does this. This will crush a cane. This cuts it nice and clean. Pair of loppers. Always necessary to have some pair of those, just to get some of the canes that are a little bit bigger. Last but not least, little pruning saws are also very, very good to use, because that way you can get down there and get some of those more difficult to reach canes. Let's talk a little bit now about when you want to do your pruning. If you live in a dormant season where the roses do go dormant, I like to start to prune them when the forsythia begin to bloom. That's nature's way of telling you that spring is on the way and the plants are waking up. It's better to do that than go by a rigid calendar. Let the plant tell you when it's time to go. When the forsythia start to bloom, start to prune your roses. Now, if you live in a season when the roses don't go dormant, you can prune basically in December and January. That's pretty customary. Some people will go a little bit longer, but not much more than that. The roses that grow by building their structure up, those Asian influence roses, a lot of people, if they live in an area with no dormant season, where the roses bloom all year, will actually prune those in the summer. When they have that's kind of when they start to go dormant a little bit. But I also want you to keep this in mind. Pruning is not a one-time event. It's not like you do it and you can't touch the rose again. You can prune all season. Do it when you deadhead, when you bring the flowers down. That's a great time to go. Right after that big first spring flush is a good time to shape it up a little bit. Don't be afraid to shape your bushes all season long. That's the best way about keeping them groomed, keeping them tidy, and it leaves a lot less chores for down the road. So that's your introduction to pruning. It's not difficult, it's not scary, and most of all, trust your instincts, because roses are plants too.